In this presentation I will talk about currently most popular TV show and its related game, Game of Thrones. There are many different games within a franchise or transmedia world, but I will focus on a Telltale's company episodic game adventure video game based on TV series of the same name and the novels, A Song of Ice and Fire. This game was released in December 2014 for Android, iOS, Windows, OS X, PlayStation, Xbox, for everything, basically. In line with the title of this conference, I will start with basic terms and their significations that are often close but somewhat different, trying not to confuse you, but to explain this type of games that are more tellable or watchable than playable. I will start with the definition of play and game. First, I have to stress that, like in many languages, in Serbian, there is no difference between play and game. It's the same word. Rože Kajwa believes that these two should be differentiated, and many theoreticians after him also believe that. So he uses the term paidea as an equivalent to English noun play and ludus for the noun game. Usually, play activities are associated with children, while games are thought to be more about adult activities. It's a common idea that games have rules and plays do not have rules. However, some anthropologists says that while a child is playing, he can say, I'm a doctor, and there is a rule in that game also, because he has to behave like a doctor and not to be a policeman, for example. So that rule was proposed and accepted by the same player, and the child can stop playing whenever he or she wants. While playing child will accept it in the same way it would accept the game, the rule in some game, not in play. So we are still on the same meaning of the words. So if both play and game have rules, which is the main difference between them, some philosophers gave a definition that classifies them by their result. So games have a result while because the player in the game can win or lose, but the player in the play cannot win or lose. He just plays. So that's the main or only difference between these two concepts. I'm sorry. So Rože Kajwa is maybe most commonly quoted theoretician in this field, and he says about the play that it's free, not obligatory, it separates from the routine of life, it's uncertain, it's unproductive in that it creates no wealth, and it's governed by rules that suspend ordinary laws or behaviors. It involves imaginary realities that may be set against real life. Kajwa distinguished four categories of game. Agon, or competition, it is the form of play in which specific set of skills is put to the test among the players. The winner is who proves to have some skills, strength, memory, intelligence, or any other. For example, in chess. Alea is a chance. It is opposite to agon. It is the resignation of will. It's basically luck. The games where you need to have luck. Mimicry, when the individual plays to believe to make himself or others believe that he's different from himself in the real world. So that's the third. And the fourth is ilinx or vertigo. It has something to do, for example, when we were kids and we were playing to spin around until we're dizzy, but we're still playing. So that's why it's called vertigo. It is worth noting that these categories can be combined, these four, to make some more new experiences between them. And Kajwa also described dualistic polarity within where these four categories can go. To paideia, it is uncontrolled fantasy, it's spontaneous play through improvisation. The rules are created during the game. And ludus, which requires some effort, patience, skills, that rules are set from the beginning of the game, and were designed before the playing starts. So these concepts should somehow explain what the difference is between the playing and gaming. However, we have in playing the video games or computer games, we have the word gameplay, which is again a problem, and we're again in between the terms and what do they mean. So there are certain similarities between game and plot. So when we see how Ludus is going, which requires then effort, patience, and skills, we have the beginning, development, the result, which can be triumph or defeat. However, if we see, Bremont did this concept based on props, functions in fairy tales. We see that the concept is pretty much the same. The hero has some task that he needs to perform. You probably know many games, many stories that start that way. Some girl maybe in between, some helper, some opponent, and at the end he usually in fairy tales succeed, but not in all. We have fairy tales with sad endings also. Distinctive features of the computer games. Problem of narrativity in computer games came from research of narrative fiction. That was the first genre that emerged in accordance with powers of new media. Coherency of the story in interactive fiction is based on involvement of player or character in real world, and in real and in fiction world that is based on certain rules of both worlds. One of the main features of these worlds are checkpoints that serve a player to construct a mental space where fiction is taking place. The most often example of interactive fiction uses the pattern of epic or high fantasy narrative, where a player needs to solve some problem and his path is usually home, away from home, fighting for justice, coming back home, with many plots that are part of the pattern. If narrative fiction needs to address the player, it uses the narrator that is outside of the story world. If it needs to address the player's avatar, it usually uses the narrator which is inside the story world. Espen Arset, ludologist, excludes narrative analysis as an approach to computer games. He believes that the computer games are specific form which primary function is based on play and interaction, not on story. Computer games explore serialized repetitive action, different levels, fast transfers to different chronotopes, magic, system of reward and punishment, certain tempo, and of course interactivity. Distinctive feature of computer game is play, action, an ergodic function, as Arset says. However, specific types of game where narrative plots, or better, narrative gaps, are filled with another narrative, micro-narrative plots became more popular thanks to transmedia storytelling and the rise of franchises. I will call this type of games tellable games. It's my term, maybe it's completely wrong, but I will use it like that to make a difference. So this is not my table, it's Jasper's Yule table, where he compares the movies and novels with games. We can see how relatively stable and simple narrative elements in movies and novels become more complicated in the second column, having in mind all kinds of games, from Tetris through FIFA, World Cup, or first-person shooter game, or endless simulations like SimCity or Sims or whatever. For example, existence in the movies or novels could be elements of the setting, while in the games they can be variable. Their appearances can be cyclic. The events are usually shown in cutscenes or at intro or outro scenes, not in the game itself. Simulation of progress with different outcomes is much frequent in games than in movies. Of course, we have some movies, for example, Run Lola Run, where we have different outcomes. Sequence of events are very rare in games. If they exist, they are only possible for the way the player to reach the end of the game and succeed. Progress within these sequences of events is possible through gaining some experience in gameplay and gaining knowledge about the story world. At the end, movie or novel character can be the same as character in a cutscene in the game. However, it is directly represented by a gameable or playable avatar, not through process of identification like we have when we watch some movie characters or TV show character. There are many games where only implicit characters exist, some invisible force like in Tetris or in Pong or in any other game when we don't have the actual character, just the force that is playing. Third column is mine. So, Telltale Games approach and the games genre is between movies or TV shows and regular computer games. Existence are the same as in films. There are no hordes of opponents that are coming in cyclical periods, like in some games, when you have new and new problems that are within the game. Events are transferred from TV show or a movie, are presented most often in cutscenes. However, events are presented within the gameplay by existence that make the reference to the original media. So, inside this type of games, the characters, you present them with avatar, but the characters always reference the main narrative, the original narrative, whether it's the TV show or the movie. How this game works. Thanks to the relative unimportance to the main characters in this type of games, there is a gap that they can fill and make a narrative and make the plot which is not, which is in the accordance with the general story. So it's part of the transmedia world. It doesn't change the main narrative like in the TV show or in film, but it adds a new layers and it adds new plots if it's well, how to say, made up in the beginning in the process of the pre-production of such type of games. Tellable games use transmedia characters that are transferred from TV shows or movies to the game. How did they do it? Of course, when we see a character in the movie, it's a character, it's an actor that plays some character. Tellable games usually use the same voice, the actors give the voice for the games, so we have that kind of resemblance, and in tellable games, it's always the graphic representation of a character. So, if we see some actor from the show, the character is made to look like that actor in the most possible way, and it's also with the voice, we have the impression that is the same thing. Usual difference in time in games like arcades, football, or some airplane simulation is very different than in movie. Dominant time relation in game is between the time that user needs to play the game or a level and the time of plot development. In narrative, usual time relation is between the story time and discourse time. There are 5 possible relations between story time and discourse time: scene, summary, stretch, ellipsis, and pause. All these influence the spectator's perception of speed of a narrative. In tellable games, time relations are close of those in movie, with small stretches that are used to give some feedback to the player. For example, pick up the axe, run to the stables, go there, go there. But after that, we're in scene time, the normal time, like in movies. But instantly when the player obeys the command, gameplay continues like in movies where story time and discourse time are in the scene. Many computer games rely on previous experience of players that were at first readers of a comic book or a book fan or a movie fan. In tellable games, previous experience, or better to say knowledge, is needed in order to succeed and move forward toward the end of the game. Cutscenes are stopping the game simulation from the ergodic point of view. They introduce the narrative but cancel the action. In tellable games, players become the spectator in these scenes. They make reference to the original narrative from which players learns about the whole narrative universe, not just the story world of the game. Thus, process of active participation is replaced with anticipation of future events related to the story world and gaining the knowledge about the whole narrative universe. Telltale Games releases video games in episodic installments, like TV shows. Their number of proofs that Telltale collaborates with studio and screenwriters in order to create a strong experience that pays homage to the original narrative. Their final product is somewhere between a computer game developer and a cable or streaming network. Telltale offers its game as a one-time season pass purchase for the game season when the first episode of the season is released, with the user then entitled to play all the other episodes. These are the episodes for Game of Thrones Telltale games. You don't have to read this. I just want to point out something. These are the characters from the HBO series and the primary book narratives at the end, which is the original story, A Song of Ice and Fire. And these are the characters in the game. So, where is the game? Game is here, where there is no mention of these characters or a little mention of these characters inside the narrative. So there is of course, problem of is it a canon or is not a canon? Should we put them there or not? But in both, because the main characters here are actually the foresters. They are only mentioned once in a book, not a single once in a TV show, but they fill the gap and they can be used as characters for this type of games. So, the story revolves around the House of Forester, rulers of some small parts in the north, whose members, including the 5 playable characters, they want to save their family during the War of the 5 Kings. The game includes settings, characters, and, like I said, the voice from the actors from the TV show. Game of Thrones received mostly positive reviews from the critics, praising the narrative, not the ergodic experience. There are some problems, the glitches in the game, the glitches in the gameplay, which were of course bad. But the main problem was for the players that were not familiar with the Game of Thrones franchise or the Song of Ice and Fire. We follow Ceric, who escapes the massacre when the Red Wedding was held, and safely reached the Forester's stronghold to bring the news about the Forester's death. I will now play you one small scene. It's only a minute. It's somewhere from the middle.
Ah, Lady Marjorie, aren't you looking lovely this evening?
Lord Tyrion, Your Grace? With your permission, allow me to introduce Lady Mira of House Forester.
So we have a choice.
Your Grace.
Point and click.
The girl knows her courtesies. Impressive. You may rise.
House Forester is a northern house loyal to the king.
Are they?
I beg your pardon, Your Grace.
I wasn't talking to you. I want to hear from the girl. Is your family loyal to the king?
Perhaps you should ask the new Lord Forester.
Joffrey is the one true king, Your Grace.
And yet, for centuries the Foresters have been loyal bannermen to House Stark, a house of traitors.
Yes, Your Grace. They are traitors.
The Starks were your liege lord, yet you name them traitors so easily. I take it this is the kind of loyalty the king can expect from you, if you have any loyalty at all. Is your house willing to swear fealty to your new liege lord, Roose Bolton?
He is the Warden of the North, Your Grace.
So, it's basically point and click. It's no problem. We have that kind of games where you search some hidden objects or anything like that. But what is the difference? The difference is that we are within the overall narrative. Whatever we do with this character or another, it will not change the narrative. Of course, it's filmed, it's already shown, but it's safely to do whatever you want it's not safe maybe for your character, but you can play it, of course, again and again like in any other game. But the experience you have, it's like watching a cartoon. I cannot say the TV show because of the iconography, of course, we don't see the actors. But you don't have that moment that you're playing the game. You're more interested in the story development because you only have to click something. So that thing, that ergodic experience is the only experience we're having in playing a game, really does not serve the purpose here. It's not a good solution. I'm sorry. So I already said that the cast for the voices were all the famous actors that were shown in Game of Thrones series. And while the game had really, really positive reactions, second seasons should have been played in 2017, then they moved it to 2018. But due to the lack of sales for the company Telltale that produces this game, I had, how to say, surprise, not even a month ago. They closed the company. It was in between me sending this abstract and me presenting here on this conference. They needed to let go the 90% of their team, and so many franchises, for example, Walking Dead, Minecraft, Batman, DC Comics, Marvel Comics, and everything they did is now on hold. There is a possibility that someone will eventually buy this company, because I think they made a new genre of something between the game and the film. Thank you very much.